Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new, welcome. My name is Adelina and I make videos about living in my tiny house on wheels and living a more intentional life. I'm in Campbell River this morning. It's Saturday morning and I am going to get groceries and run some errands. But first I am stopping at this little cafe that my friend Jenny found when she was here helping me with the move. It's called the Ideal Cafe and it's a traditional kind of greasy spoon diner cafe. And what I love about it is it's got some amazing vegan options. I was so impressed when we were here the last time. So I'm going to go in and have some breakfast and then I'm going to run my errands. Today I'm going to address a subject that a lot of you have talked about. When I made the video about having to move, the primary comment I got was, well, variations on Dick the neighbor was really a dick, and why do people have to do this? So I want to just discuss how I feel about the whole situation, how I feel about that neighbor in general. People are people, right? You never fully understand what somebody's going through and what their motivations are, but I think it's important that I address it. So I'm going to have breakfast first because I've only had one cup of coffee and I need more than one to get all cylinders firing. So let's go inside. Hi. Yeah, I can sit at the bar. Awesome. Well, they discontinued their pancakes, their vegan pancakes, because there wasn't enough people buying them. But I had a very delicious bowl, which was great. So now I am at Walmart to get my groceries and a few things. You know what I really want to get? I want to get some binoculars because there's so much to see out in the ocean and all of these birds and wildlife around here. And the camera on the iPhone just isn't enough. I need to get a decent camera with a telephoto lens. But in the meantime, I just need a pair of binoculars. But I'm gonna get my groceries and then we will chat. I am on Saratoga Beach. It's so pretty here. There's a number of RV parks or campgrounds along the ocean here, as well as some houses. I don't know what to say. It's kind of forlorn, but it could be the weather because as you can see, it's still overcast. It actually rained all night, which was lovely. I love the sound of the rain on the roof. And for those of you who have asked about the wildfires and whether I am close to that, I'm not. There are a couple of wildfires that are burning on Vancouver Island. but I'm not near one per se, and I haven't actually experienced any smoke or haze from the wildfires that are on the island. Not that that might not happen in the future. I have experienced the smoke from wildfires several times when I lived in Calgary, both from the U.S., the smoke coming up from the U.S., and when we had those, that year where it felt like all of northern Alberta and BC was on fire, kind of like this year. But so far here, where I am on the island, I haven't experienced anything like that. The coastline of Vancouver Island is just amazing. The beach is sandy, and with the tide out as it is right now, at least partially out, you can walk out for quite a ways. You can see the little kids in the distance there running in the sand. Today is kind of chilly. I mean, the ocean's always going to be cold, but right now it's a little chilly, so I wouldn't want to be running in the water. So today I want to talk about everything that happened, how I feel about what happened, and by that I mean having had to move from my previous spot, which was in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island here. And really basically, oh my God, you gotta see this. Oh, Pumpkin, you're so cute. Little bulldog. So cute. Sorry about that. Anyways, so if you don't already know, and I'm sure you do if you're watching my channel, I moved to Vancouver Island from Calgary in my tiny house on wheels in September of 2022. And then in December, I got a knock on the door from a bylaw officer saying that there had been a complaint about the tiny house. And so the process started that eventually ended with me having to move from that site. Now, the property I was on was private property that was 6 acres, owned by a young couple with 4 kids, young kids. I think all of them under 6. They had actually talked to all their neighbors, and their neighbors knew that they were building a pad for a tiny house. They built it on one end of their property, separated by some woods. Everybody was fine with the situation up until they weren't. Now, there was one neighbor named Dick, and I won't make the same joke I made the last time, who at some point decided he wanted to put a tiny house on his property, and he went to the county, and the county said, no, you're not zoned for that. He then went on to the website to make a formal complaint. In order for there to be a file started, there had to be a complaint formally made, which meant that there was a form online that you have to fill in and submit, and then the bylaw officer comes and talks to you. So once that happened, there was a file that was opened and a process that had to be followed. When the bylaw officer came to talk to me and to the landlord, she said, we see these houses all the time. I saw you guys move in. We don't do anything about it because we understand that that affordable housing on the island or anywhere is an issue. We don't want to put people out of their houses. But if a complaint is made and a file is started, then there's a process that needs to happen. So what had to happen was the building inspector for the county had to come, the environmental inspector had to come, and they had to look at the tiny house, which they did at the end of January. Then from that point forward, it was just back and forth. The issue was that they considered the tiny house an RV. If it was a mobile home, there would have been no problem. But because they considered that tiny house an RV, you couldn't live in it full time year round. Now, they did say if I was prepared to permanently remove the axles from the trailer and affix it to a permanent foundation, then they could approve it. but this wasn't my property. And to remove the axles from the trailer, it's not just like something you can weld back on when you want to move the tiny house, right? That house is way too big, and that would totally compromise the structural integrity of that trailer. So that was not going to happen. So it came to the point where there was a process that the landlord, my landlord, could go through to apply for a variance to try and get around that. It was an expensive process. It was going to take multiple months, and then there was still no guarantee that they were going to approve having the tiny house there. Ultimately, I had a conversation with them and said, I think it's worth you going through that process, but I can't take the chance that it's not going to resolve itself in our favor. I don't do well with uncertainty and the unknown. And so, therefore, I'm going to start looking for another spot. Which didn't make any of us happy, but obviously they understood, and I think was the right decision to make. So I started looking for spots to park my tiny house, new spots where I wouldn't have to deal with this again. So I ended up moving to a spot here just outside of Campbell River. And it is a legal parking spot for the tiny house, and I never have to deal with this again. But I want to address some comments that I've had in that initial video where I talked about having to move, and since. Basically, the comments boil down to, well, she should have known better. The rules are the rules. They're there for a reason. And you can't think that you're special and go around them. If it's not allowed, it's not allowed. Fair enough. I can accept that comment. I really can, because I get that philosophy. I'm very much a rule follower. I know that might sound surprising to some of you, but I really am. I'm very much, I call myself a serial rule follower. But I just want to address that and give you my perspective, and with the disclaimer that this is my opinion. You may not agree with my opinion, but this is my opinion on the whole situation of tiny houses and the difficulty of finding a legal parking spot, and the difficulty that municipalities and government agencies have in accepting them. First, let's start with the two areas of contention when it comes to parking for tiny houses on wheels. We have the land use bylaws and we have building codes. So there's two things here that are in play. And I want to address both of them. I'm going to address the building code one first, because I think it's the easiest one to address, and I think the one that most people will agree on. I get it. I think that tiny houses should have to be built to some sort of building code. And here's why I think that. And I'm going to give you an exception. The exception is if you own 20 acres of land and you're plopping your tiny house in the middle of it and you want to build it yourself, I want you to be safe. Don't get me wrong. I want those to be built safely so people are safe living in them and there's no dangers. However, if you build it yourself and you build it poorly, the only person who's going to suffer is you. But if tiny houses are to be accepted in residential areas and on properties near other houses, then I do think that there's real importance and value in having them built to some sort of code, because if something happens, if they catch on fire because they're not built properly, it's going to affect more than that one person or persons that are living in that tiny house that they built. Having that as a requirement is going to allow building inspectors, municipalities to wrap their brains around accepting a home that is less than 400 square feet. Because most building codes have a mandatory minimum size that they will go to, and it's usually around 800 square feet, depends on where you live in Canada, the US, anywhere else. But what's important is that municipalities, building inspectors, county inspectors have confidence that the house that they're approving, that the house that's being built, that's being put in a residential area or any area, is built to a code and has been inspected and is therefore safe. And interestingly, when the county building inspector came to see my tiny house, serendipity, he was impressed and happy to see the CSA certification on the house and had therefore been inspected at every step of the build. And I heard him say to the bylaw officer basically that he was happy to see that CSA sticker. He said something like, you should see some of the houses we see that are, just basically thrown together. So he was happy to see it. However, because it still didn't fit the narrow parameter that they have on their books, it was still didn't fit the definition on their books of what a house could be. And I think that that's a real challenge, a real problem, and needs to change. The rules have to change to offer other options for people who want to have their own home but cannot fit into the outdated, traditional, tiny little box of what home ownership is, as far as all of the rules on the books right now. So that's the building codes. And I can get behind having building codes for tiny houses so that everybody knows that they're being built safely and to code, and therefore protecting the people who are living in them and the people who are living around them. Got it. But the second topic and this is one that I think is the crux of the issue here, is the land use bylaws. So land use bylaws were put into place way back for a very good reason. And they were put into place to keep industrial development out of residential areas. So there couldn't be a factory building tires built right in the middle of a residential area with houses and schools and all of that. There was a reason for that. But it doesn't apply in this situation, and it's totally outdated. And the fact that these bylaws are still on the books, and while in some areas, maybe even many areas, they're slowly evolving, they're evolving at a snail's pace, a fraction of a snail's pace, and not nearly fast enough given the housing crisis that is happening in virtually every part of North America, and I'm sure in Europe and other countries and continents as well. I get why they're in place, but it doesn't apply to tiny houses. Tiny houses are residential. The bylaws don't take into account tiny houses. Tiny houses weren't on the radar when they were originally put on the books, and it seems like no government official, no government agency, no municipality wants to be the first to, take the chance and make the changes. But the fact is, we need to make the change because the population has grown so much, and there's not enough land for everyone who wants a home to have a standalone house on a quarter acre of land or whatever. There's just not enough property for that. And the land and the property that does exist is usually so expensive that the majority of people can't afford it anyways. So those bylaws have to change and adapt to the situation as it stands right now. And as the situation is that we need to find ways to build alternative housing options that are legal and easy for people to navigate. I will also say that one of the things that really needs to be changed is the fact that one person complaining can have such power over everybody around them. Traditionally, people who moved to the countryside, who bought land, did so to get away from municipalities, to get away from urban density, so that they could live their lives the way they wanted to live on their own property without all of these rules and restrictions on how they lived their lives. People moved to the country, and still do, the majority, I believe, to get away from all of that. They just want to live on their own terms, in their own way. They're not hurting anybody. They're not doing anything illegal or unsafe. They just want to be left alone to live their lives on their own land, on their own terms. That sounds pretty damn awesome to me. But what's happening is there's this other group, and it's a much smaller group, that is moving from those urban areas to the country. And when they get there, they're like, well, wait a second, my neighbor's doing that, and my neighbor's doing that. And that's not how it was when I lived in the city or the town that I came from. And I don't like that. So I'm going to have something to say about what my neighbor's doing. And those fraction of a percentage of people wield so much power because of the bylaws, the way they're written, that it is scary. So you have this majority of people that move to the country to get away from all of that, to get away from their neighbors being in their business and the government telling them what to do. And those people follow them into the country and then decide they want to be in their neighbor's business and tell them what to do. I think most of us just want to be left alone to live our lives. I don't want to be in my neighbor's business. I want to be left alone. I want my neighbors to leave me alone, and I will leave them alone. And unless they're doing something that is destructive and blatantly illegal, that is impacting my safety and my health, I really don't give a shit what they're doing on their property. But there's always a percentage of people who do want to be in everybody's business, who do have an opinion about what everybody else is doing, and who really believe that their opinion has value and matters. And unfortunately, the bylaws as they're written, it gives those people, that fraction of a percentage, all of the power in the situation. So that neighbor, Dick, he firmly believes that his opinion about how everybody else around him is living their lives has value and needs to be listened to. And because of the way the laws are written, he does. Yeah, I'm aware that the majority of people who live in tiny houses are living on the fringe of those rules, of those bylaws. But that doesn't mean that they're wrong. People need affordable housing. The way things have always been is not a good reason for keeping things the way they are, if that makes sense. We need to evolve this whole situation. People need options that they can afford. And tiny houses are just one of those options. Tiny houses aren't for everybody, but neither are these great big houses. Two people, one person living in 3,000 square feet on an acre or more of property is lovely if that's what you want and that's what you can afford. But the fact is, there is not enough land for everybody to have that. And the majority of people nowadays, the reality is they just can't afford it. But do those people not deserve to have houses of their own? Do those people not deserve to live life on their terms just because archaic rules are on the books and far too few bureaucrats have the balls to change them, I would argue that everybody deserves to have a home of their own, of whatever type that they want, and that people deserve to be left to live their lives in a way that suits them. Period. So, yeah, we need some rules because we live in a civilized society, but we're getting to the point where these rules that were put in place to keep us safe are now suffocating us. And I think it's got to change. It is changing, and hopefully these changes pick up speed because we're running out of time. Wow, that sounded deep, didn't it? Anyways, that's my opinion on this whole thing. Do I hold Dick any ill will? Well, he's not my favorite person on the planet, obviously, but I don't hold any ill will to anybody. The fact is, I don't know what's going on in Dick and his wife, whatever her name is, what's going on in their lives. I have found that people who behave that way are often unhappy people who are living very, very small lives for whatever reason, and who feel like they have no control over their lives. And so doing this gives them a feeling of control and power because they can affect other people, strangers that they don't even know, but they can cause real impact on their lives, usually to their detriment, the other person's detriment. But it gives them a sense of power. And I understand that. Do I like it? No, but I understand it. So I don't hold ill will to Dick. I just, wish that this situation didn't keep happening to people who are trying to live an alternative lifestyle. And I really, really do hope that the change that is happening will speed up. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're getting out to enjoy the weather and the countryside wherever you are. I just want to say thanks for watching and thanks for your support. I love you guys. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. The crow agrees. See you next time.